How did we get here? With The Mandalorian and Grogu, the first new Star Wars movie in 7 years is about to come out, and no one really seems to care. The views on both of the released trailers are way lower than they are for any modern day Star Wars movie, and fans everywhere are voicing their skepticism and disinterest. It's genuinely hard to find people on the internet who are full of excitement for this film. And we're talking about Star Wars here, one of the biggest entertainment franchises of all times. So how did we get here? To answer this question, one could make a long rant about how Disney is terrible and ruins everything, or one could look at the timeline of modern day Star Wars since the acquisition of Lucasfilm and dissect how each major release tore a giant crack into the franchise that spreads into everything that follows. We, my dearest friends, are going to do both. Oh, and spoiler warning for Star Wars as a whole, in particular the sequel trilogy. When Disney bought up Lucasfilm and with it the rights to Star Wars for more than $4 billion in 2012, fans were split between skepticism and excitement. But when the first trailer for Episode 7, The Force Awakens, came out 2 years later, all concerns were washed away by a giant wave of hype. On YouTube, it gathered record-breaking amounts of views and everybody was talking about it. We saw stormtroopers, lightsabers, new characters, and even the Millennium Falcon. The next epic in a galaxy far, far away was right around the corner. Star Wars was finally back! Little did we know that the first crack was already showing. We just weren't looking. By the way, do consider liking the video and subscribing if you enjoy this content and want to support a small channel like mine and its humble beginnings. But let's get back to the actual video. In December of 2015, the movie finally released and everybody and their grandmother flocked to cinemas. Episode 7 made over $2 billion, making it the highest grossing movie in North America and the third highest grossing movie in the world at its time. And how did audiences like the revival of the franchise? Well, the reactions were really positive across the board. Sure, it wasn't deemed to be as good as, let's say, The Empire Strikes Back, but people thought it was still hugely enjoyable. Sure, we had already seen almost everything in the movie before. The stormtroopers, the Millennium Falcon, the protagonist from a desert planet, Han, Chewie, the third Death Star in the series. I mean, yeah, technically you could almost call this a soft remake of A New Hope, but that's all fine because surely Disney just wants to ease us back into the franchise with something familiar while laying the foundations of new and exciting things to come. Right? Well, no. Not in the slightest, actually. It turns out that nostalgia wasn't just deliberately used for Disney's first Star Wars film, it was their entire business strategy for the foreseeable future. Han Solo, Palpatine, Ahsoka, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan Kenobi, so many of the shows and movies that we have gotten from Disney center on already established characters and timelines within the universe. And even if they have an original protagonist, they still feel the need to constantly circle back to the safe and familiar. Though none of what I'm saying applies to you, Andor. You are perfect and I am thankful for your existence every day. I love you. At this point, recycling seems to be all they can do, because every time they try out something truly new, it ends up being dog water. Yes, I am looking at you, the Acolyte. Speaking of dog water... When the trailer for Episode 8, The Last Jedi, dropped 2 years later, the goodwill and hype of fans was still going very strong. And this next installment? It looked pretty damn good. People were excited to see what they were going to do with the newly set up characters, like what's Rey's backstory, who is this new main villain Snoke, and How will they integrate Luke into all of this? And
Do you want to know the truth about your parents? They're filthy junk traders who sold you off for drinking money.
oh, okay. So, The Last Jedi was controversial, to say the least. Remember how I said that Star Wars under Disney was incapable of doing anything new? Yeah, this movie is an exception, because it tried to be different, alright? By throwing everything its predecessor and the entire series as a whole had established out of the window. Now look, I believe that subverting expectations is a good thing, you just have to do it well. The problem with The Last Jedi is not that it went against what its predecessor set up, but that it does so in a nonsensical way that butchered character arcs, introduced massive plot holes, and went against the rule set of its established universe. I think The Last Jedi had interesting ideas, and even something like Hermit Luke might have worked under different circumstances. But the writing quality is just too bad throughout way too many parts of this film. Don't even get me started on the terribly unfunny humor. The movie isn't awful, there are good things buried here somewhere, it's just that the script desperately needed some revisions. Since then, the writing quality overall just continued to deteriorate. Sure, we had some good bits in between, like the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian and Andor, my beloved, but besides that, it just seemed to be a race to the bottom of stupidity, that bottom of course being the Acolyte and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's baffling how Disney seemingly doesn't have any kind of quality control when it comes to literally the most valuable IP they own. With Kenobi in particular, I cannot wrap my head around how this thing was allowed to release in the shape that it did. I mean, here you have one of the most beloved characters from your multi-billion-dollar franchise, a great setup for a continuation of his story together with one of your other fan favorite characters, Darth Vader, and all you managed to put out there was this? How can you possibly screw up this badly multiple times in a row? You have all the money and talented filmmakers you could possibly ask for. Who reads these scripts and thinks to themselves, yep, the fans are gonna love this one? Who watches these scenes and then greenlights them? All of this is already bad enough, but the crack that revealed itself with the final movie of this trilogy is just as, if not more, poisonous for the franchise. After The Last Jedi had disappointed many, fans were treating Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, with a lot more skepticism than before. But still, not all hope was lost, and people were curious how the movie would build on the surprising directions that its predecessor took. Well, it turns out it wouldn't, like at all. Quite the contrary, at every turn Episode 9 actively tried to destroy everything The Last Jedi had set up. Luke being a cynical hermit, throwing away his lightsaber and dying at the end of Episode 8, don't worry about it, he's back as a noble Force ghost who can catch lightsabers and raise ships. Snoke having an impactful death and creating a vacuum of power, don't worry about it, somehow Palpatine returns and effectively replaces him. Rey being a nobody and coming from an insignificant family, don't worry about it, she's now Palpatine's granddaughter. How do you want to explain any of this? Don't worry about it, we're not even going to try. At every turn, this movie is determined to undo everything The Last Jedi did and bends backwards to appease its fans, leaving nobody happy in the end. Now, one thing became very clear if it hadn't already been before. Disney had absolutely no overarching plan for these movies, or the franchise as a whole. They said, yeah, let's make a sequel trilogy, and then just had different people coming in, throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks, which again is just baffling from a writing standpoint. Like, what do you mean you don't know what the second and third movie in your planned trilogy are going to be about? What do you mean you didn't bother to make a long-term plan for the future of Star Wars? With the original movies and the prequels, things were ordered and cohesive. You had 3 movies each in one specific era that told a properly planned out story. Under Disney, we have a trilogy that actively works against itself and a headless franchise floating around directionless within its timeline. They can't really build on the sequels now because those were a disjointed mess, and they are seemingly unable to do anything new. What we get is a bunch of shows that all exist somewhere in between the already established movies and always need to circle back to the familiar characters to draw people in. This directly brings me to the final point and the final crack that Disney punched into Star Wars. Up until the acquisition of Lucasfilms, there had been 8 major releases in the franchise, including both trilogies, the Clone Wars movie and the Clone Wars TV show, all over the course of 35 years. Each new movie consequently felt like an event that you had to witness in theaters. It had something special and magical to it, and there was room for excitement to be built up over the years. Under Disney, on the other hand, we have gotten 18 major releases with 5 movies and 13 TV shows over the course of just 14 years. There is simply an oversaturation of Star Wars content, especially of course of Disney Plus shows. Coupled with the lack of quality, cohesion and fresh ideas, this is absolutely detrimental to the interest audiences have in any new project. How are you going to get excited about a new show or movie coming out if you've seen 10 different shows in the last 5 years alone that all range from mediocre to complete garbage? Except of course for Andor, as well as the first 2 seasons of Mando. Is it really any wonder that people don't care about The Mandalorian and Grogu when looking at the state of the franchise right now? I mean, we don't even know what this film was supposed to be. Is it the finale of the Mandalorian Disney Plus show? No, because they already said that the script for the 4th season exists. Is it going to be the start of the next main film trilogy, if there ever will be such a thing again? No, it doesn't look like that either. Was the main incentive in making this movie to sell more Baby Yoda toys? Most probably, yes. So, where does all of this leave us for the future of this franchise? I have no clue. There have been numerous announced movie projects, including a sequel to The Rise of Skywalker with Rey returning as the protagonist, a movie called Rogue Squadron, an untitled Taika Waititi movie, and a movie by James Mangold about the dawn of the Jedi, just to name a few. But God knows how many of those are actually in development and how many have been cancelled long ago. Everything points towards Disney still having no clue on how to move this franchise forward, and the next proper trilogy of films seems to be light years away, if it's coming at all. We only know that we're getting what looks to be a stretched out episode of The Mandalorian, as well as a movie called Star Wars Starfighter starring Ryan Gosling, which we also have basically no information about at this point. I for my part can say that my expectations have never been lower and my excitement never more absent. And that's a damn shame. But I don't think my love for this franchise will ever truly fade away, and some distant part of me still hopes that Disney takes the right lessons from the critical acclaim of Andor. I guess in the end, only time will tell. Well, that's it for this video. If you want to see more, go check out my last video where I talk about how AI is trying to take over Hollywood, and don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also follow me on Letterboxd, the link is in the description. Have fun watching movies, and see you in the next one.